They said King Silas Blackwood had a heart made of iron. He was the most feared alpha in the Northern Hemisphere, a man who could crush rebellions with a single command. But inside the walls of his cold, empty estate, the king was helpless. His 6-year-old daughter, Lily, hadn't spoken a single word or cracked a smile since the fire that took her mother 2 years ago. Silas had hired the best therapists, the most expensive nannies, and the most powerful healers. Nothing worked. He was ready to give up hope. Until the day a rejected Omega named Tessa, a woman deemed worthless by her own mate, walked into the nursery with a bucket of soapy water and done the one thing the king couldn't do. When Silas saw what happened next, the Iron Alpha didn't growl. He fell to his knees and wept. This is the story of how the lowest member of the pack saved the highest, and found a love worth burning the world down for. The rain in the Blackwood territory didn't wash things clean. It just made the mud deeper. That was how Tessa felt as she stood behind the communal gymnasium of the Red River Pack, her boots sinking into the slush, her hair plastered to her skull. Across from her stood Brody. He was handsome in that rugged, predictable way that high-ranking wolves were. Broad shoulders, jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and eyes that used to look at Tessa with warmth, but now only held pity. And pity, Tessa realized, was far worse than hatred. "You have to understand, Tess," Brody said, his voice struggling to be heard over the drumming rain. He refused to look her in the eye. He was looking at the brick wall behind her, at his truck, anywhere but at the mate he was about to destroy. "It's just physics, biology. I'm next in line for the beta position. The pack needs strength. They need a bloodline that ensures powerful warriors." Tessa wrapped her thin grey cardigan tighter around herself. It was soaked through, offering no warmth. She was an Omega. In the hierarchy of the Red River Pack, she was invisible. She worked in the kitchens, she mended uniforms, and she kept her head down. But the moon goddess had paired her with Brody. For 3 months she thought love might conquer the hierarchy. "I'm strong, Brody," Tessa whispered, her voice trembling not from the cold, but from the cracking of her heart. "I work double shifts. I never complain. I can learn." "It's not that kind of strength," Brody snapped, finally looking at her. His eyes flashed gold, his wolf agitated. "Look at you, Tessa. You're frail. You faint if you don't eat every 4 hours. You have no shifting combat skills. If I take you as my mate, the Alpha will laugh at me. The pack will see me as weak." He took a deep breath, the cruelty of his next words hanging in the air before he even spoke them. "I'm rejecting the bond, Tessa. I'm choosing Jessica." Jessica. The name hit Tessa like a physical blow. Jessica was the head gamma's daughter. She was tall, athletic, loud, and cruel. She was everything Tessa wasn't. "You can't just choose," Tessa stammered. The bond is a suggestion, not a law," Brody said coldly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled envelope. "I spoke to Alpha Miller. Since our mating is being annulled, you can't stay in the main packhouse anymore. It would be awkward for Jessica. And for me." He shoved the envelope into her freezing hands. "Alpha Miller is reassigning you. You're being transferred to the royal estate. King Silas requested extra domestic staff for the winter season. It's a service position. You'll leave in an hour." Tessa stared at the envelope. The royal estate? That was 300 miles north. It was the home of King Silas Blackwood, the Alpha of Alphas. Rumors about that place were terrifying. They said the king was a beast, that he had gone mad with grief after Queen Lydia died, that staff members didn't last a week before fleeing in terror. "You're sending me away?" Tessa asked, her voice barely a squeak. "To the king? It's a job, Tessa. You should be grateful. Most Omegas without a mate end up on street patrol." Brody turned his back on her, walking toward his truck. "Good luck. Don't cause trouble." He didn't look back. He got into his truck, the engine roared to life, and he drove away, splashing mud onto Tessa's legs. Tessa stood there for a long time, the rain mixing with the hot, angry tears tracking down her cheeks. She was 22 years old. She had no family, no rank, and now no home. She had been discarded like a broken toy because her genetics weren't prestigious enough. She looked down at the envelope. The royal seal, a black wolf on a silver shield, was stamped on the front. "Fine," she whispered to the empty air, wiping her eyes with a shaking hand. "If I'm nothing to you, Brody, then I have nothing left to lose." She didn't know it then, but getting into that transport van an hour later was the best thing Brody could have ever done for her. He thought he was throwing away trash. In reality, he was sending a diamond to the only man who knew how to recognize its value. The royal estate was not a house. It was a fortress of grey stone and black iron, perched on a cliff overlooking a churning, dark ocean. When Tessa arrived, the air smelled of salt, pine, and overwhelming power. The transition was brutal. The head housekeeper, a stern, older woman named Mrs. Higgins, had no patience for a heartbroken Omega. "You are here to work, not to mope," Mrs. Higgins had barked on the first day, handing Tessa a rough uniform that was 2 sizes too big. "You are assigned to the East Wing. Floors, windows, and dusting. You are never to speak to the king. If you see him, you bow, avert your eyes, and become invisible. If you disturb him, you will be thrown out of the territory boundaries to fend for yourself. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Tessa had said softly. For 2 weeks, Tessa became a ghost. She woke up at 4 a.m., scrubbed marble floors until her knees bruised, and polished silver until her fingers cramped. She saw King Silas only once, from a distance. He was a towering figure in a black suit, storming down the hallway with a phone pressed to his ear. The aura radiating off him was suffocating, a mix of raw power and pitch-black aggression. Every wolf in the hallway whimpered and pressed themselves against the walls as he passed. He looked like a man who wanted to fight the world. But the East Wing was strange. It was quieter than the rest of the castle. The other maids avoided it, whispering about the silent girl. Tessa didn't pay attention to the gossip. She preferred the silence. It matched the hollowness inside her chest where her heart used to be. One Tuesday afternoon, Tessa was polishing the baseboards in the long hallway of the East Wing. It was raining outside, a heavy storm that battered the windows. The castle felt gloomy and cold. As she worked her way towards the end of the hall, she noticed a door slightly ajar. It wasn't a bedroom. It looked like a library or a playroom. Tessa knew the rules: clean only where assigned, never snoop. But she heard a sound. It wasn't a growl or a shout. It was a soft, rhythmic thud, thud, thud. Thinking a window had blown open, Tessa pushed the door. The room was magnificent. It was a nursery the size of a ballroom, filled with every toy imaginable. Giant stuffed bears, an electric train set that wove through the room, a dollhouse that was a replica of the castle. But in the center of the room, sitting on a plush rug, was a tiny girl. She had dark, curly hair like the king, and pale skin. She was wearing a yellow dress that looked too cheerful for the gloomy atmosphere. She was holding a wooden block, dropping it onto the floor, picking it up, and dropping it again. Thud, thud. This was Lily Blackwood, the princess, the girl who hadn't spoken in 2 years. Tessa froze. She should leave. She should run. If Mrs. Higgins found her here, she would be fired instantly. But then, the lightning flashed outside, followed by a crack of thunder so loud it shook the floorboards. The little girl flinched violently. She didn't scream. She didn't cry out. She just curled into a tight ball, her hands flying over her ears, her small body trembling so hard she looked like she was vibrating. Tessa's Omega instincts, usually suppressed and ignored, flared to life. This wasn't a royal. This was a terrified child. Without thinking, Tessa dropped her cleaning rag. She didn't rush over. That would startle the girl. Instead, she walked slowly into the room, making her footsteps deliberate but soft. That was a big one. "Wasn't it?" Tessa said, her voice low and calm. The little girl didn't look up. She was hyperventilating, rocking back and forth. Tessa sat down on the rug, about 5 feet away. She didn't try to touch the girl. She just sat there, crossing her legs. "When I was little," Tessa said, looking at the ceiling, pretending to inspect the painted stars there, "my dad told me that thunder is just the sky moving its furniture around. The clouds are redecorating." Lily stopped rocking for a second. She didn't look up, but her ear twitched. Tessa reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out the only thing she owned of value, a small silver locket that had belonged to her grandmother. It wasn't much, but it was shiny. "I don't like the noise either," Tessa admitted, "so usually I try to make a different noise, a better one." Tessa began to hum. It wasn't a royal anthem or a complex song. It was a simple folk lullaby from her old pack, a song about a river and a moon. Hum hum la da da. The storm raged outside, but inside the nursery, Tessa's voice created a bubble of warmth. She kept humming, closing her eyes, letting her own grief pour into the melody. She wasn't singing for the princess anymore. She was singing for herself, for the rejection, for the loneliness. She felt a small weight on her knee. Tessa opened her eyes. Lily Blackwood had crawled over. The little girl was staring at Tessa with wide, violet eyes, eyes that held a depth of sadness no 6-year-old should know. She reached out a trembling hand and touched the silver locket hanging from Tessa's fingers. "It opens," Tessa whispered conspiratorially. "Do you want to see?" Lily nodded. A tiny, barely perceptible nod. It was the first time she had communicated with anyone in 6 months. Tessa smiled, a genuine, warm smile that crinkled her eyes. She clicked the locket open. Inside was a tiny, dried, blue flower. "It's a forget-me-not. My grandma gave it to me." Lily looked from the flower to Tessa's face. Then, very slowly, the little girl reached into the pocket of her yellow dress. She pulled out a plastic, neon-green dinosaur. She placed the dinosaur in Tessa's hand, a trade. "That is a ferocious dinosaur," Tessa said seriously. "Is he the guard of the nursery?" Lily's mouth twitched. The corner of her lip went up. Just a fraction. And then the door to the nursery slammed open. "What do you think you are doing?" The voice was like a thunderclap. Tessa scrambled back, her heart stopping. Standing in the doorway was King Silas. He was soaked from the rain, his white shirt clinging to his muscular chest, his eyes blazing with fury. His wolf was near the surface, growling in his throat. He saw a lowly maid sitting on the floor with his daughter, holding his daughter's toy. "Get away from her," Silas snarled, stepping into the room. The air pressure dropped. "Who let you in here?" Tessa scrambled to her knees, bowing her head so low her nose touched the carpet. "Your Majesty, The storm. She was scared." "Get out," Silas roared, pointing at the door. "You are fired. Get out of my house before I throw you out the window." Tessa scrambled up, tears springing to her eyes. She dropped the green dinosaur on the rug and turned to run. She had messed up. She had lost the only roof over her head. But before she could reach the door, a small sound stopped everyone in the room. No, it was a rusty, scratchy voice, like a door hinge that hadn't been used in years. Silas froze. His anger evaporated instantly, replaced by a look of absolute shock. He looked down. Lily was standing up. She was glaring at her father. Her small hands were balled into fists. "No," she said again, louder this time. She pointed at Tessa. "Stay." Silas turned to look at Tessa, his face pale, his mouth slightly open. He looked back at his daughter, who hadn't spoken since the funeral. "Lily?" Silas whispered, his voice breaking. "You spoke." Lily didn't look at him. She walked over to Tessa, grabbed Tessa's hand with a fierce grip, and dragged the terrified Omega back to the rug. She sat down, patted the spot next to her, and looked at her father expectantly. Tessa looked at the king, terrified. "Your Majesty, Silas wasn't looking at Tessa with anger anymore. He was looking at her hand, engulfed in his daughter's tiny grip. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. The king of the north, the man who killed rogue wolves with his bare hands, looked like he was about to collapse. "Stay," Silas said hoarsely. It wasn't a command. It was a plea. "Do as she says. Please." The news that the mute princess had spoken spread through the castle faster than a forest fire. By dinner time, everyone from the scullery maids to the beta guards knew that the new Omega girl from the Red River Pack had done the impossible. But this miracle didn't make Tessa's life easier. In fact, it put a target on her back. Tessa was moved from the servants' quarters in the basement to a guest room in the east wing, right next to Lily's room. It was a beautiful room, with a soft bed and a window overlooking the ocean, but Tessa felt like a prisoner. Mrs. Higgins was furious. She felt undermined. The professional nannies, 3 of them, with degrees in child psychology, were humiliated that a girl who smelled like floor wax had succeeded where they had failed. "It's a trick," Tessa heard one of the nannies, a tall woman named Clara, whispering in the hallway. She probably gave the child candy, or threatened her. Omegas are manipulative. The next morning, Tessa was summoned to breakfast. Not in the kitchen, but in the royal dining room. The table was long enough to seat 50 people. King Silas sat at the head, looking tired but imposing. Lily sat to his right. There was an empty chair to Lily's right. "Sit," Silas said, not looking up from his tablet. Tessa hesitated. "Your Majesty, surely I should eat with the staff." "Lily won't eat her oatmeal unless you are here," Silas said, sliding the tablet away. He looked at Tessa. His eyes were a piercing ice blue, intense and analyzing. "Sit down, Miss Reynolds, is it?" "Yes, Alpha. Tessa Reynolds." She sat down gingerly. Lily immediately brightened. She pushed a bowl of strawberries towards Tessa. "Thank you, Lily," Tessa smiled. "So," Silas said, leaning back in his chair. He didn't eat. He just watched them. "My head of security has run a background check on you, Tessa Reynolds. Rejected by a future beta. Parents deceased. No criminal record. Grades in school were average." Tessa flushed. "I tried my best, sir. But I had to work to support my parents when they got sick. I don't care about your grades," Silas said bluntly. "I care about results. Yesterday my daughter spoke 2 words. This morning she told me she wanted Tessa. That is 3 words. That is 3 more words than I have heard in 730 days." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "I am promoting you. You are no longer a cleaner. You are Lily's companion. Your salary is tripled. You answer only to me." Tessa's jaw dropped. "Triple, sir, I can't. I'm not qualified." "You are the only one she likes," Silas said, a hint of frustration in his voice. "That makes you the most qualified person in this kingdom." "But the other, staff." "I don't care about the staff." Silas slammed his hand on the table. Tessa flinched. Silas immediately softened, seeing the fear in her eyes. He took a deep breath, rubbing his temples. "I apologize. I haven't slept in a long time. Look, Tessa, I am a king. I can fight wars. I can negotiate treaties. But I cannot fix my little girl. I feel powerless. If you can help her, I will give you anything you ask for." Tessa looked at the king. For the first time, she didn't see a monster. She saw a father who was drowning. "I don't want anything, Your Majesty," Tessa said softly. "I just want her to be happy. She's a sweet girl. She's just lonely." Silas looked at Tessa for a long moment, his gaze lingering on her face. There was a strange tension in the air, a pull that made Tessa's wolf stir within her. It wasn't the mate bond. She had already been rejected, and he was a king. But it was something, a recognition. "Very well," Silas said, clearing his throat and standing up. "I have council meetings all day. Take her to the gardens. She used to love the roses." As Silas walked past Tessa's chair, he paused. He was close enough that she could smell him. Rain, cedar, and expensive scotch. "Thank you," he murmured. so low only she could hear. Tessa spent the next week in a dream. She and Lily played in the gardens. They painted pictures. Tessa hummed songs, and Lily started humming back. By Friday, Lily was speaking in full sentences, though only to Tessa. But the castle was a dangerous place for an outsider to rise so quickly. On Saturday evening, the annual Alpha Summit was being held at the estate. Alphas from neighboring territories were coming for a banquet. It was a high-stress event. Tessa was in the nursery, helping Lily into a velvet party dress. "Do I have to go down?" Lily asked, pouting. "The Alpha from the west smells like onions." Tessa laughed. "You have to go down for 10 minutes to say hello. Then we can come back up and read stories." Suddenly the door opened. It was Mrs. Higgins, the housekeeper, accompanied by 2 guards. "Miss Reynolds," Mrs. Higgins said, her face grim. "Please step away from the princess." "What's wrong?" Tessa asked, standing up protectively in front of Lily. "We found something in your room," Mrs. Higgins said, holding up a clear plastic bag. Inside was a heavy diamond necklace. Tessa gasped. "That's the Queen's necklace. I saw it in the portrait in the hall." "Yes," Mrs. Higgins said smugly. "It was found under your mattress during a routine inspection. Theft of royal property is a crime punishable by banishment or death." "I didn't take that," Tessa cried. "I've never even been in the royal safe room. Someone put it there." "Save it for the dungeon," the guard growled, grabbing Tessa's arm. "No!" Lily screamed. She latched onto Tessa's waist. "No! Let her go!" "Princess, she is a thief," Mrs. Higgins said, trying to pull Lily away. "Daddy!" Lily screamed at the top of her lungs. "Daddy!" The commotion spilled out into the hallway just as King Silas was walking down the corridor with 2 other visiting Alphas. One of them was Alpha Miller, Tessa's old Alpha, and standing next to him, serving as his assistant, was Brody. Tessa froze. Brody. Silas saw the guards manhandling Tessa and his daughter screaming. The temperature in the hallway plunged. "Release her," Silas said, his voice deadly quiet. "Your Majesty," Mrs. Higgins said, stepping forward with the bag. "We caught her. She stole Queen Lydia's diamond choker. It was in her bed." Silas looked at the necklace. Then he looked at Tessa. Tessa was shaking, tears streaming down her face. She saw Brody watching her. Brody was smirking. He leaned over to Alpha Miller and whispered, "I told you she was trouble, Alpha. That's why I rejected her. She has no honor." Silas heard it. His head snapped toward Brody. "Did you say something, boy?" Silas asked. Brody straightened his jacket, trying to look confident in front of the king. "I said, Your Majesty, that this Omega is from my pack. I rejected her as my mate because she is flawed. It's not surprising she resorted to theft." Tessa felt like she was going to vomit. The humiliation was total. To be accused of theft in front of the king and her ex-mate. Silas looked at Tessa. "Did you take it?" "No," Tessa whispered, looking him straight in the eyes. "I would never. You gave me a home when I had none. I would never steal from you." Silas looked at her. He used his alpha senses, listening to her heartbeat. It was fast, but steady. The rhythm of fear, not deception. Then he looked at Mrs. Higgins. "Who authorized a search of her room?" Mrs. Higgins faltered. "I had a suspicion, sir." "A suspicion?" Silas stepped closer to the housekeeper. "Or jealousy?" "Sir, the evidence is convenient," Silas finished. He took the bag from her. "This necklace has been in a biometric safe that requires my fingerprint to open. Unless Miss Reynolds cut off my finger while I was sleeping, she couldn't have taken it." Silence descended on the hallway. Mrs. Higgins went pale. "Someone in this house has the access codes," Silas growled, his voice rising. "Someone tried to frame the only person who has made my daughter smile." He turned to Brody. "And you," Silas said, walking up to Tessa's ex. Silas was 4 inches taller and radiating lethal energy. "You rejected her?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Brody stammered, his confidence breaking. "She wasn't strong enough." Silas looked at Tessa, who was hugging a sobbing Lily. Then he looked back at Brody. "You are a fool," Silas said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You threw away a queen to chase commoners, and now she is under my protection." Silas turned to the guards. "Arrest Mrs. Higgins for conspiracy, and find out who gave her the codes." He walked over to Tessa. He didn't care about the visiting alphas. He didn't care about protocol. He reached out and gently wiped a tear from Tessa's cheek with his thumb. The touch sent a shock wave of electricity through both of them. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. "I think so," Tessa breathed. "Take Lily to her room," Silas said. "I will handle this trash. Tonight, you dine at my table. Not as a servant. As my guest." He turned back to the stunned crowd, his eyes glowing alpha red. "If anyone looks at her with anything less than respect," Silas roared, "they answer to me." The Alpha Summit dinner was an affair of suffocating luxury. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a golden glow over the 300 guests gathered in the great hall. The air smelled of expensive perfume, roasted venison, and the underlying metallic scent of powerful pheromones. Tessa felt like an imposter. After the incident in the hallway, King Silas hadn't just invited her to dinner. He had commanded his personal stylists to prepare her. She stood at the top of the grand staircase, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was wearing a gown of deep, midnight blue silk that shimmered like water when she moved. It hugged her curves in a way her old grey uniforms never did, flaring out at the waist. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, cascaded down her back in soft chestnut waves. Around her neck, she didn't wear diamonds. She refused them after the accusation. But instead, she wore a simple velvet ribbon Silas had given her, claiming it matched her eyes. "Breathe," she whispered to herself. "Just breathe." As she descended the stairs, the chatter in the hall died down. It started near the steps and rippled outward until the entire room fell into a stunned silence. Heads turned, jaws dropped. At the bottom of the stairs stood King Silas. He was wearing his formal military dress uniform, black with gold braiding, medals gleaming on his chest. He looked dangerous, regal, and breathtakingly handsome. When he saw Tessa, the glass of scotch in his hand stopped halfway to his mouth. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, darkened with an emotion that looked dangerously like hunger. "You look—" Silas started, his voice rough, before he cleared his throat. "You look adequate." Tessa smiled nervously. "Adequate? I'll take it." "You look like a queen," a small voice piped up. Lily was standing behind her father's leg, clutching a stuffed rabbit. She was wearing a blue dress that matched Tessa's. It was a statement. The king, the princess, and the Omega were a matched set. Silas offered Tessa his arm. "Shall we?" Walking into the dining hall on the arm of the Alpha King was like walking into a lion's den. Tessa could feel the glares of the high-ranking female wolves who had spent years trying to court Silas, but she also felt the heat of Silas's arm through his jacket, a grounding force that kept her steady. They were seated at the high table. Directly across from them sat Alpha Miller of the Red River Pack, and next to him Brody and Jessica. Brody looked like he had been slapped. He couldn't take his eyes off Tessa. He was staring at her with a mix of shock and greed. He had thrown her away when she was covered in mud and wearing rags. Now, seeing her polished and glowing with the king's favor, he realized the magnitude of his mistake. Jessica noticed Brody's staring. She dug her fingernails into Brody's arm, hissing something in his ear. But Brody ignored her. Midway through the third course, while Silas was discussing border trade with Alpha Miller, Brody leaned across the table. "You clean up well, Tess," Brody said, his voice trying to sound casual but failing. "I barely recognized you." The table went quiet. Tessa slowly lowered her fork. She looked at the man who had broken her heart in the rain just a few weeks ago. She expected to feel pain. Instead, she felt nothing. He looked small. "It's amazing what happens when you're treated with respect, Brody," Tessa said calmly. "You should try it sometime." Brody flushed. "Look, About the rejection. Maybe I was hasty. The pressure from my father, the pack rankings. It's complicated. But seeing you here, fitting in so well. Maybe we could talk later. Private? Jessica gasped, dropping her wine glass. It shattered, red wine staining the white tablecloth like blood. Brody, I am sitting right here. But Brody was focused on Tessa. The bond, it takes time to fully sever. If we accept each other again before the next full moon, we can fix this. A low, vibrating growl started to emanate from the seat next to Tessa. It wasn't a human sound. It was the sound of a predator about to kill. King Silas didn't shout. He didn't stand up. He simply turned his head slowly toward Brody. His eyes had shifted completely to wolf black. The air in the room grew heavy, the gravity increasing until it was hard to breathe. "Did you just proposition my daughter's companion?" Silas asked, his voice soft but carrying to every corner of the silent hall. "In front of your current mate? In front of your alpha? In front of me?" "Your Majesty," Brody stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. She is my mate." "By rights. You rejected her," Silas said. "You threw her in the mud. You sent her away. In my territory, a rejection is final." Silas stood up. He towered over the table. "Furthermore," Silas continued, placing a possessive hand on Tessa's shoulder. His fingers burned through the silk of her dress. "Tessa is under my personal protection. If you speak to her again, if you look at her again, I will consider it an act of war against the Blackwood estate. And I have never lost a war." Brody shrank back into his chair, terrified. Alpha Miller looked pale, quickly kicking Brody under the table to shut him up. "Music!" Silas commanded to the room at large. The orchestra hurriedly began to play a waltz. "Dance with me," Silas said to Tessa. It wasn't a question. He led her to the dance floor. As he pulled her close, his hand resting firmly on her waist, Tessa felt a spark, literal electricity, zing through her spine. "You didn't have to do that," Tessa whispered, looking up at him. "I can handle Brody." "I wanted to," Silas murmured, pulling her closer than was strictly proper. "I don't like sharing." "Sharing what?" Tessa asked breathlessly. "I'm just an employee, Silas." It was the first time she had used his first name. Silas stopped moving. The dancers around them blurred into the background. He looked down at her, his expression tortured. "Is that all you are?" he asked intensely. "Because when you are near, the silence in my head finally stops. When you smile at Lily, I remember what it feels like to be alive. You are not just an employee, Tessa. You are the only thing holding this house together." He leaned down. His lips brushed her ear. "And if you were mine," he whispered, "I would never have let you stand in the rain." Tessa's heart stopped. She opened her mouth to speak, to ask him what he meant. But suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the ballroom burst open. A guard, covered in blood and ash, stumbled in. "Your Majesty!" the guard screamed, collapsing to his knees. "The West Gate! It's an attack! Rogues!" The music died. Screams erupted. Silas's face shifted instantly from lover to warrior. He shoved Tessa behind him. "Get Lily!" he roared at her. "Take her to the safe room, now!" The next hour was a blur of chaos. The rogues weren't just random attackers. It was a coordinated military strike. Explosions rocked the castle grounds. The power cut out, plunging the estate into darkness. Tessa didn't think. She ran. She sprinted up the stairs in her heels, ripping the skirt of her gown to move faster. She burst into the nursery. Lily was hiding under the bed, clutching her dinosaur. "Tessa!" Lily cried. "I've got you, baby, I've got you!" Tessa said, scooping the child up. Lily was heavy, but adrenaline gave Tessa the strength of 10 wolves. She ran toward the secret passage in the east wing that Mrs. Higgins had once warned her never to touch. Silas had told her the code, 1105, Lily's birthday. Tessa punched the code into the keypad behind a tapestry. The wall slid open. But as she stepped into the dark tunnel, a figure stepped out from the shadows, blocking her path. It was Alpha Miller, Brody's Alpha. He was holding a gun. Not a traditional wolf weapon, but a human gun loaded with silver bullets. "Going somewhere, sweetheart?" Miller sneered. Tessa froze, clutching Lily tighter. "Alpha Miller, what are you doing? Help us!" "Help you?" Miller laughed. "I'm the one who opened the gate. Do you think I came here for the food? Silas has held the Northern Territory for too long. He's weak, grieving. It's time for new management." Tessa stepped back. "You're working with the rogues." "I paid the rogues," Miller corrected. "Now hand over the girl. Without an heir, Silas has nothing to fight for. He'll surrender the crown to save her." "No," Tessa said, her voice shaking but firm. "I wasn't asking." Miller raised the gun. "Give me the child, Tessa. You're an Omega. You're disposable. Don't die for a pup that isn't yours." Tessa looked at Miller. Then she looked at the terrified face of the little girl in her arms. Lily buried her face in Tessa's neck. "She is mine," Tessa snarled. It was a sound that shouldn't have come from an Omega. It was a maternal roar, primal and vicious. Tessa didn't run away. She threw herself forward. She grabbed a heavy brass candelabra from a hallway table and swung it with all her might. Miller, expecting her to cower, was too slow. The brass hit his wrist. The gun went off with a deafening bang. Tessa felt a searing, white-hot pain in her shoulder. The bullet had hit her, but she didn't stop. She kicked Miller in the knee, hearing a satisfying crunch, and shoved past him into the tunnel. "Run, Lily!" Tessa gasped, putting the girl down. "Run to the end of the tunnel. Don't stop!" "Tessa, you're bleeding!" Lily screamed, tears streaming down her face. "Go!" Tessa shoved her. Lily ran. Tessa turned back to the entrance of the tunnel. Miller was getting up, his face twisted in rage. He picked up the gun with his other hand. "Stupid bitch!" Miller spat. Tessa slumped against the stone wall, clutching her bleeding shoulder. Her vision was blurring. She had bought Lily maybe 30 seconds. It wasn't enough. Miller raised the gun at Tessa's head. "Goodbye, Omega." Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the darkness behind Miller. It moved faster than the eye could see. A massive hand grabbed Miller's head and slammed it into the stone wall. Crack! Miller crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Standing there, breathing heavily, covered in the blood of his enemies, was King Silas. He looked at Miller's body. Then he looked at Tessa. He saw the blood pooling on her blue dress. "Tessa!" The roar of pain that left Silas's throat shook the very foundations of the castle. He dropped to his knees beside her, gathering her into his arms. "I got her out," Tessa whispered, her eyes fluttering. "She's safe. In the tunnel." "I don't care about the tunnel," Silas yelled, pressing his hand over her wound to stop the bleeding. Tears were mixing with the war paint and blood on his face. "Stay with me. Tessa, look at me. It hurts. I know. Silas was frantic. He bit his own wrist, offering it to her mouth. "Drink. My blood will heal you. Drink, Tessa." Tessa tried, but she was too weak. Her head lolled back. "Why?" Silas sobbed, rocking her back and forth. "Why did you fight him? You're an Omega." "She's my daughter, too," Tessa breathed. And then the darkness took her. The beeping of the monitor was the first thing Tessa heard. Beep, beep, beep. She smelled antiseptic and pine. Strong, overwhelming pine and rain. She opened her eyes. The light was blinding. She was in a hospital bed, hooked up to IVs. Her shoulder throbbed, but it was a dull ache, not the sharp fire it had been. "She's awake!" A small body launched itself onto the bed. "Lily! Careful, princess!" a deep voice warned. Tessa blinked. Lily was hugging her legs, burying her face in the blanket, and sitting in a chair right next to the bed, looking like he hadn't slept in a week, was Silas. He was unshaven. He was wearing a wrinkled t-shirt. He looked nothing like a king, and everything like a man who had been keeping a vigil. "Water," Tessa croaked. Silas was moving instantly. He held a cup with a straw to her lips, supporting her head with a gentleness that made her heart ache. "You've been out for 4 days," Silas said, his voice gravelly. The silver. It was close to your heart. The doctors weren't sure. Lily? Tessa asked. Safe, Silas said, nodding at the girl. Because of you. He sat down on the edge of the bed. He took her hand. His skin was hot against hers. Tessa, Silas said seriously, we need to talk about what happened in the tunnel. Tessa felt a spike of fear. Did I do something wrong? Was I not supposed to hit an alpha? You fought an alpha to save my child, Silas said, but that's not what I'm talking about. When I found you, when I touched your blood, I felt it. Tessa's breath hitched. Felt what? The snap, Silas whispered. The bond. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. My wolf recognized you. It happens sometimes, in moments of extreme trauma or sacrifice. The barriers break down. You aren't just an employee, Tessa. You aren't just a random Omega. He looked into her eyes, his gaze intense and vulnerable. You are my true mate. The moon goddess gave me a second chance. She sent you to me. Tessa stared at him. The king? Her mate? But I'm an Omega. I was rejected. I'm broken. You are the strongest wolf I have ever met, Silas said fiercely. You took a bullet for a child that wasn't yours. You faced down a traitor alpha with a candlestick. Rank means nothing. Soul means everything. Daddy is right, Lily said, lifting her head. She looked at Tessa. You're my mom now, okay? Tessa's eyes filled with tears. Okay. The door to the hospital room opened. 2 guards walked in, dragging a man in handcuffs. It was Brody. He looked terrible, bruised, dirty, and defeated. Your Majesty, the guard said. We found him trying to sneak out of the territory borders. He claims he didn't know about Miller's plan. Silas didn't let go of Tessa's hand. He turned to look at Brody with cold indifference. I didn't know, Brody pleaded, looking at Tessa. Tess, tell him. I'm an idiot, but I'm not a traitor. Miller used me. Tessa looked at Brody. She felt a strange sense of closure. He was just a boy who didn't know what he wanted. Silas was a man who knew exactly what he valued. Let him go, Tessa said softly. Silas looked at her. He insulted you. He rejected you. And if he hadn't, Tessa said, squeezing Silas's hand, I never would have come here. I never would have met you. I never would have met Lily. His rejection was the best gift he ever gave me. Silas considered this. He looked at Brody. You heard your queen, Silas said. Brody's eyes went wide. Queen, strip him of his rank, Silas commanded the guards. He is banished from the north. If he ever returns, kill him on sight. The guards dragged a weeping Brody away. He took one last look at Tessa, the woman he threw away, lying in the bed of a king, loved and cherished. The regret on his face was a punishment worse than any prison. 6 months had passed since the attack in the tunnels, and the seasons had turned the world white. The royal estate, once a fortress of jagged grey stone and imposing gloom, had been transformed. Heavy drifts of snow blanketed the turrets, and the courtyard, usually filled with drilling soldiers, was now decorated with thousands of white fairy lights that twinkled against the early evening dusk. It was the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, and traditionally the most powerful night for a mating ceremony. Inside the Queen's chambers, the air was thick with the scent of lavender and nervous anticipation. Tessa stood before a floor-to-length gilded mirror, her breath catching in her throat. The woman staring back at her felt like a stranger, yet also more herself than she had ever been. She wasn't wearing the grey rags of a cleaning maid. She wasn't wearing the ill-fitting uniform of a servant. She was draped in a gown that seemed to have been woven from the winter moonlight itself. It was white silk, heavy and luxurious, with long sleeves of delicate lace. The train pooled around her feet for 3 feet, embroidered with silver thread in the shape of tiny forget-me-nots, the flower she had shown Lily in the locket on that first stormy day. Tessa ran a hand over the fabric. Her fingers trembled. I can't believe this, she whispered to the empty room. I'm just Tessa. I'm just an Omega. The imposter syndrome, that old familiar ghost, tried to claw at her throat. She remembered the mud on her boots. She remembered Brody's sneer. She remembered being told she was genetically worthless. How could she be the Queen of the North? "You look better than okay." The small, confident voice broke Tessa's spiral. She turned around. Sitting on the edge of the massive four-poster bed was Lily. The little girl, who had once been a ghost haunting her own nursery, was now vibrant and alive. She was wearing a miniature version of Tessa's dress, her dark curls bouncing as she swung her legs. "You look like the moon goddess," Lily corrected herself, hopping off the bed. She walked over and took Tessa's hand. Her grip was warm and solid. "Are you scared?" Tessa squeezed the small hand. "A little bit, Lilybug. There are a lot of people out there. Important alphas, dignitaries, people who think I don't belong here." Lily frowned, her violet eyes narrowing with a ferocity she inherited directly from her father. "If anyone says that, I'll tell Daddy to throw them in the dungeon, or I'll bite them." Tessa laughed, the sound bubbling up freely. "Let's try to avoid biting the guests today, okay?" Suddenly, the heavy oak doors to the chamber creaked open. "I believe the rule is no biting unless provoked," a deep velvet voice rumbled. Tessa spun around. "Silas, you can't be in here. It's bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony." King Silas Blackwood stepped into the room, closing the door softly behind him. He was breathtaking. He wore the traditional ceremonial armor of the Northern Kings, black leather accented with silver fur at the shoulders, a sword at his hip, and a cape that swept the floor. He looked every inch the warrior king, terrifying and majestic, but his eyes were soft. "I make the laws, Tessa," Silas said, walking toward her with a predatory grace, "and I decided I couldn't wait another hour to see you." He stopped a foot away from her, afraid to touch the perfection of her dress. His gaze traveled from the crown of her head to the hem of her train, his expression shifting from awe to a deep, burning possession. "You are—" Silas struggled for words, shaking his head. "You are radiant." "I'm terrified," Tessa admitted, her voice shaking. "Silas, look at me. I was scrubbing your floors 6 months ago. The council, the other alphas, they're going to laugh at you. They'll say you weakened your bloodline by mating with a rejected Omega." Silas closed the distance between them. He reached out, his large, calloused hands cupping her face. The heat of his skin grounded her instantly. "Let them talk," Silas growled low in his throat. "Let them say what they want. They didn't see you in the tunnel. They didn't see you stand against an armed alpha with nothing but a candlestick and courage. You have more royal blood in your little finger than they have in their entire lineage." He reached into the pocket of his tunic. "I have something for you." Tessa watched as he pulled out a familiar object. It glittered dangerously in the candlelight. It was the Queen's diamond choker, the heavy, intricate necklace of white diamonds and sapphires, the same necklace Mrs. Higgins had planted under Tessa's mattress to frame her for theft. The same necklace that had almost gotten her banished. Tessa recoiled slightly. "Silas, that necklace—" "I know," Silas said softly. "It was used to hurt you. It was used to shame you." He stepped behind her, parting her hair. "But I want you to wear it today," he whispered into her ear as he fastened the clasp. The cold metal settled against her warm skin, not as a stolen object, but as yours. "I want you to wear it, so that every person in that hall knows that what was once used to try and destroy you is now your crown. You conquered the lie, Tessa. Now wear the truth." Tessa looked in the mirror. The diamonds didn't look like a noose anymore. They looked like armor. They sparkled fiercely, matching the fire in her eyes. "Ready?" Silas asked, offering her his arm. Tessa took a deep breath. She looked at Lily, who was beaming. She looked at her mate, the most powerful man in the world, who looked at her like she was the only star in the sky. "Ready," she said. The great hall was a sea of faces. Over 1,000 wolves from packs all over the continent had gathered. The air was vibrating with the hum of the crowd. When the heavy doors swung open, a hush fell over the room instantly. The music began. Not a traditional march, but a string quartet playing the melody of the lullaby Tessa used to hum to Lily in the nursery. Lily walked first, scattering white rose petals with serious determination. Then Tessa and Silas walked, together. Usually the bride walks alone to meet the groom, but Silas had refused. "We walk together," he had told the planner. "I walk nowhere without her." As they moved down the long aisle, Tessa felt the gaze of the crowd. She saw Alpha Miller's replacement, looking respectful. She saw the kitchen staff, cooks and maids who used to ignore her, wiping tears from their eyes, beaming with pride. She was one of them, and she had made it. But she also saw the envy. The high-born she-wolves who had wanted Silas for themselves. They looked for flaws. They looked for the weak Omega. But they found none. Tessa held her head high, the diamonds at her throat blazing under the chandeliers. She didn't shrink. She didn't look down. She met their gazes with a calm, serene power. She wasn't just Silas's mate. She was the mother of the heir, the savior of the princess, and the survivor of the storm. They reached the altar, where the high priestess stood waiting with the ceremonial chalice. The ceremony was ancient and visceral. They exchanged vows not just of love, but of loyalty. "I, Silas, Alpha of the North," his voice boomed through the silent hall, "pledge my life, my blood, and my soul to you. You are the calm in my storm. You are the light in my darkness. I reject all others. I choose you." "I, Tessa," she answered, her voice clear and steady, ringing like a bell. "Pledge my heart and my strength to you. I will stand by your side when the world is bright, and I will fight for you when the night is dark. I choose you." The priestess nodded. The mark. Silas turned Tessa slightly. He leaned down, his eyes flashing gold. He brushed his lips against the sensitive skin where her neck met her shoulder. "Do you accept me?" he whispered, a final question. "Forever," Tessa breathed. Silas sank his teeth into the mating gland. It wasn't painful. It was an explosion of euphoria. Tessa gasped as the bond snapped into place, permanent and absolute. She felt his soul merge with hers. She felt his immense power flood her veins, mixing with her own resilience. She felt his love, a vast, terrified, overwhelming ocean of love, crash over her. The crowd erupted. A roar of approval shook the stained glass windows. "All hail King Silas! All hail Queen Tessa!" Lily ran up to the altar, unable to wait any longer. Silas scooped her up in one arm and pulled Tessa close with the other. The three of them stood there, framed by the winter window. The Alpha King, the healed princess, and the rejected Omega who had saved them both. Tessa looked out at the cheering crowd. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she thought of the rain in the muddy parking lot. She thought of Brody driving away. She realized now that the rain hadn't been a punishment. It had been a baptism. It had washed away the life that wasn't meant for her to make room for the one that was. Silas kissed her temple, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you, my queen." Tessa smiled, a smile that outshone the diamonds around her neck. "I love you too," she whispered. "Now let's go home." And that is the story of Tessa and King Silas. It's a reminder that sometimes, when the world slams a door in your face, it's because the universe is trying to guide you to a palace. Brody chased status and lost everything. Tessa chased kindness and won a kingdom. It proves that your value isn't determined by who rejects you, but by who accepts you. If this story touched your heart, or if you just love a good Alpha Regrets Everything moment, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We post new romance sagas every Tuesday and Friday. What would you have done if you were Tessa? Would you have forgiven Brody? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.